Hello and welcome to another episode of Coding Coffee with me, Francis Peck. The second episode will do a little recap of what we tried and hopefully learned in the last episode. First thing is, I also learned something myself, so I'm making these videos with OBS. Last time I did not have the cursor on there, so it might have been a bit difficult following all the steps. This is fixed now, so let's get to it. Again, we're at the pythonanywhere.com website. I hope you were able to register last week, and then you should have okay, let's get some privacy here and logging in. So here's our app, the one that we initiated, Between Two Cracks. We can go to the web app. Actually, it shows it here. Open it up in the other screen. Oh, that's the app. Okay, let's just renew it. And can we now open it from here? Oh, it keeps just giving us the website. And we just want to kind of, oh, okay, that's where we click. Hello from Between Two Cracks. Still up there where we left it last time. This was a file that we were working on. So just initiating this app and having the root that points with the slash to the main root of your website, and the hello world function that returns the sentence we get displayed when we go to the website. So important things when using Python Anywhere and working on the files is saving, which you do here, and reloading. Every time you make a change, you have to reload. This is one of the things that in hindsight I figured it might have been difficult to see what's going on, but we didn't do a lot in the last episode, just kind of getting started. In this episode, first important thing that we're going to do is not just relying on the Python Anywhere safe. We want to keep our code even safer by versioning it, and to do that we're going to use the Git tool and make a repository on github.com. So I'm assuming most of my audience here has not been actively programming, and so you're not really aware what GitHub is. So here we are. You could see I was already logged in, checking it out before. Basically, when you're working on a coding project all by yourself, it doesn't really matter how you save the code. Although you might also want to version it, because you'll break things. At some point, it just won't work, and you'll be scratching your head trying to figure out what you did wrong. That's one place a versioning system already is for great help to then be able to go to an earlier, what we then call a commit, a version state, let's say, and go back to a version that was working, and then work your way back to figure out where it went wrong. Another very important thing is when you're kind of working as a team together, someone might be elaborating a function in one part of your application and another developer in another part, and then you kind of have to get to a common version, and you try to merge different functionalities together and get it operating. So for all these kind of applications, you want this kind of versioning systems. There are several. Git as the kind of command line tool is the most famous one. GitHub is then the online interface. There's also GitLab. You also have Bitbucket. In short, there's a lot of choice. I just happen to be experienced with GitLab. So if you don't already have an account like me, this is where you can do the, well, no, this is where you do the sign up. Welcome to GitHub. Well, that's very cool. You already have kind of a terminal-like interface where you then can continue. So what happens if GitHub meets somebody? It should already know. Well, the email is invalid or already taken. That is right. So I will just head over to the sign in. All right. Again, giving me just a bit of privacy there. In the background, I am always using a passwords manager. That's kind of very important to have more security on the web. Okay, so here I am logged in. As you can see in the top left corner, this is actually the project where I'm working on modifying my Popper. So it has some code, some Python code, but then also some code that can operate the Arduino and the sensors that I have been using there. It's been quite some time since I actually worked on it. I guess this is the Arduino file and code. This is a very different kind of programming style, very much more C-like than what we're seeing here in this tutorial with Python. So, but we're not here to study anything else than Python at this point. What we now want to do is make a repository for our web application that will allow us to make our coffee notes digitally. So when you're on your home page, you just select a new repository. Here you have the owner. Sometimes you could have multiple accounts. Then you would have options here. In our case, this should just be the login name that you chose during the sign or registering process. And then we go for a repository. You can actually select between two cracks also, because each kind of owner or organization can have any kind of repository names. You can also just choose something completely different. We're going to make this a public one, and for your own application, you could keep it private. If you're not sure you want to share from the get-go, or it might just be something very private that you want to track some data on, and you don't want to just throw it on the net. Of course, I'm making this repository so I can share it with you, so that also you don't necessarily need to copy paste everything I'm typing in the window during the tutorials. You could also get it from this tutorial. We're not going to initialize it because that we're actually going to do on the Python backend. So create repository. That only takes a second. And the thing that is very handy is that it actually shows here how you can create that repository from the command line. So this is the second very important thing that we're exploring in this second episode, and that is using a terminal. So you go to consoles, you could first go to the dashboard, and here we have the consoles. This one here would bring you in a Python environment. So that's the same environment that is running the application. But for this lower level kind of stuff, we want to use Bash. Now Bash stands for Born Again Shell. And Shell was, I think back in the 70s, one of the first programs that allowed you to interact with a computer. And several years or maybe a decade later, we had a Born Again Shell. Quite a nice name, and it became a bit of a standard. Although now on a Mac system, for example, if I'm not mistaken, it's a Z shell, because Mac doesn't know how to handle open source very well. You are always able to install a Bash shell also on your Mac if you would like to do that. But we're getting a bit adrift here. Let's go back to the instructions we got from GitHub. So it was about, well, maybe making a readme.md. MD stands for Markdown. It's kind of an easy annotation language where a hashtag actually means a title. So we would have title between two cracks. And it's a kind of a place where you put initial documentation for a project. That's why GitHub is suggesting to do this first command. So each line here would be a command to the computer. Please do this for me, please do that for me. So we're starting with echo. So echo would be just repeat what I'm saying after this, which is what's between the quotes, which we also were using in Python in that first episode. And this two greater than signs actually mean direct this output that you get from doing this and direct it to the file with the name readme.md. But to do that, first important thing is actually first knowing where are we. So when we opened the terminal, you see there's actually a readme from Python Anywhere. And then we're doing cut, which is concatenates. And when you just do that with the file name, it kind of shows you what's inside of the file. So see https help pythonanywhere.com and get some help this way if you don't know how to handle a terminal. So there's also a lot of documentation, of course, on pythonanywhere.com to get you started on the terminal. And a lot of other places on the internet you can find many tutorials. For this one, if you just kind of copy line by line as I'm doing, it should just work. Let's now move to our Between Two Cracks folder. This is the one we made last time. You can have another look. You see there's no readme yet. So we will just echo this and execute this. Now if we do another list, so ls for list, then we see this readme.md appearing right here. if we do the same operation as we did on the parent folder, well, now we see this string positioned in the file. Okay, this is a bit of boring stuff, but this is just an initial introduction to the bash environment. Of course, the only thing that we really want to do is initiate this as a versioning tracking repository. And to do that, you just have to do git init. Git is already installed on Python Anywhere. They know developers like to work with it, so a lot of those kind of tools are already within your environment. And now it's initialized. We're actually adding this README file too. But, you know, GitHub couldn't know that we already worked on some other things as well. We have that Flask application file there. Oh, of course, here we're getting an error. I forgot the add, so git add. Now, if we're just asking get status, it's going to show us we want to add 2 files to this repository. And then a very common first kind of saving operation with a first commit. But let's make this a bit more interesting. First commit of between 2 cracks. Well, actually, I can also call this Coding Coffee episode 1. Even though we're in episode 2, I haven't changed the main file we worked on. So you can go back in the future and look up this commit to see what was the version we started with. Now, this next line is to give the name of the main branch, which doesn't have one. So we're saying we're working on, yes, that's failing, which isn't really a surprise because there's nothing there yet. Okay, let's see if the rest doesn't fail. It's kind of an interesting debate that's behind this little error we're observing here. But first, let me try. Well, this is also going to fail now because we weren't able to do it. Okay. Status. Okay. Git branch. It's very strange. List. So that's a little check to see, yes. And what's the branches? There's no branches here. Okay. Okay. Now, you see, for me, it's a new environment. I will also make mistakes. I wasn't really paying attention to what Git was telling me. Basically, it was asking me to let the machine know who I am. Well, the machine knows, but the Git command line tool doesn't. And of course, it also wants to know who I am. Now, why is it important who I am? As I'm making a version here, it will record this information. And as I push it to a public repository, this commit and these lines of code will be attributed to me. So it's also for copyright kind of important. So let's try again the commit, which just move your arrow up until you get back to the one that gave an error. And now we're on master. Now we're actually getting to the big debate and the reason why we have this extra command here. And that is to rename master to main, because it's no longer cool to talk about masters. It seems to imply that in your system there might be something like slaves. So of course in the Star Wars universe, as far as I know, it's still okay to talk about masters. But in our real universe, when we're working on code repositories, we're not supposed to mention the master, but just the main branch. Your main branch is kind of your default branch. When you go through projects, as the first place you go to check out what's the state of this project, you would read that readme there and get some information. And usually, if you want to make changes to a project, you would, what we then call fork, you kind of make a little split and you do some work on that other branch, which might be just a small feature you're kind of developing, so you might give the branch a name of that feature, and then commit the changes in that branch, push that to that repository. If you don't control the repository, you would then do a pull request to ask the person responsible if you can include your changes in that main branch. So a lot of details here. Now if we ask get branch, it will show us this main one. So we can go back. We can finally, well, the origin line should have worked. And we can now try and push it. So although I set my user email is Francis Beck, it's still going to want a repetition here for logging into GitHub. Oh. So, well, actually, I think my username is just like this. So it wouldn't be the full email. Yes. Let's see if this still works. Now I have to give myself a bit of privacy just here. And okay, well, actually, it's not necessary on a terminal, because a terminal is not going to show you how many characters my password is. Just a small blink. Now, of course, it might be failing. Okay, the support for the password authentication was removed on August 13. That's a very good point. So, we have passwords to protect entrance, and then they're so easy to break. These kind of platforms now work with keys. And the one point lacking is that it should make a comment about that here. But we can have a quick look at it. No. So this is the link. Cloning with, copy that. Yes. Okay, this isn't really helping too much, is it? Let's go to the profile. Or the settings. And then all the way down, you will find something like developer settings. So here we have options: GitHub apps. Want to build something that integrates with and extends GitHub? We're not doing that. Personal access tokens. Fine-grained tokens. Okay, let's just ask for a classic. Okay, need an API token for scripts or testing. Generate a personal access token. Okay, Node, Python anywhere. It will expire in 30 days. Okay, public repository. And now we're going to generate a token. This is an item where privacy again becomes important. Ooh. Okay. But let's just show it. I can always delete this, and I will, of course, after I finish this tutorial. So now I'm copying it. You won't be able to see it again later. So you actually need to store this somewhere. Now I can try again. If I can push it. So at least at this point we know the username is good. And then the question is, will it accept my API key? And that it did. If we now go back to the repository, which was here, it's getting very confusing, isn't it? And I will at this point delete this. So you know this is where you go to kind of generate a token. Let me just show you that. Okay. So I just generated this token to be able to show you how you can push to a repository. Of course, now this token is all over the internet. If you think a password isn't safe, well, a token, it's a password, but as you can see, it's just a long one. So of course I am deleting this. I understand, delete it. So I was able to push it. So my two projects, let's go and jump to Between Two Cracks. Here it is, the application we were working earlier on. So you can also go to this location here and you will be able to see this code as it is a public repository. At this point, we haven't really done a lot of cool things programming wise, but we set everything up so we can easily save our work, go to different states. Following this tutorial, this will allow you to jump to different commits for the different tutorials. So if you're watching this in a year or 2 years, you would still be able to kind of track how this project was evolving. The other thing I wanted to do to wrap it up, because we're already half an hour into this kind of administration work, is reflect a bit further on versions. So we talked about the versions of the code that we're going to make. We're basically at version 0.0.1, just initial state. Of course, we're already working with Flask, which has a specific version number. So actually also in the future, if you will be following this tutorial, it will be important using the same library versions to have a bit of security that you would get the same results, because in 1 or 2 years, and even if you're using those versions, there's no guarantee at all. Now, in the Python Anywhere environments, pip freeze should now give you a list of everything that is installed. And there's a lot already here, because they want you to be able to go and experiment out of the box. Now, I'm going to do another kind of trick in Bash, and that's using a pipe symbol after a command. So pip freeze gives you a list of all the packages installed in this environment. If you now add a pipe symbol after that, and then you write grep, for grep, think about grabbing. We want to grab something in this output, and specifically we want to grab any line with Flask. Well, grab any line with Flask. So there's a lot of Flask sub-applications. The main one is Flask 2.1.2. So we're now in the repository. We want to make a file, requirements. Okay. And we want to write this Flask. So doing the echo and then using the quotes to demarcate the string. We want to add this to the requirements. So now if we look with cat inside of this file, it shows us a version of Flask that is running and showing our between two cracks very interesting homepage. Now this file I'm again going to add to the between two cracks repository. So if we now ask status, it should say, oh, there's a new file here. I wasn't aware of it before. On GitHub, it's actually not there. I'm going to commit this with a message saying coding coffee episode 2. So now I'm doing Ctrl-R for going back in history to find back this command line saying git push origin main. So I want to push this, and that will be the new file for this very boring second episode. I promise we'll get back to Python programming in episode 3. I hope you were able to kind of follow along here and there. We'll do a bit more recap next time. In the meantime, I'll generate myself a new secret token so I can upload this. Happy coding and enjoy your coffees.